Welcome back to RotoQL University. Today's lesson, we're going to be talking about player ownership and why it's so important. For this video, we've invited one of the most knowledgeable people in the DFS industry regarding ownership. He's a former poker professional and now the CEO of Own the Play, a DFS site that offers real-time ownership percentages. I'll let him handle the rest of the intro. Matthew Chatlin, what's going on?
Hey man, thanks so much for having me. As I was saying to you earlier, it's very, very cool to be doing this. I think that we are both in the business of wanting to get kind of everyone aware of new ways to make themselves better at daily fantasy. I love this venue for Own the Play. There are so many people that want to have opinions in this space, but RotoQL wins. So I love being a part of that, and Own the Play wants to support the leaders and the winners in this space. So just really thank you for having me here, and I'm excited. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to discuss more about Own the Play and some of the exciting stuff that you guys got going on. But I wanted to get a little more of your background in poker and DFS, just to tell the viewers a little more about where you're coming from.
Sure, man. So before I founded Own the Play, I played 6 million hands of poker. That'd be physically impossible pre-internet. Maybe 100 people around the globe can make the same claim as me. 2011 hits. I will never forget that day, April 15th. The U.S. government seized the largest poker sites in the world, the 3 top poker sites. I lost my livelihood and 90% of my net worth that day. I'm 32 now, being 27. I will say I had no idea what to do, but I did leave the country to continue to pursue playing internet poker for a living. Did that for a few years and came back in 2013, really the middle of 2013, and became very familiar with daily fantasy. Started playing on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Draft Street a lot. Really saw great success as a player. As I said to you before this interview started, if I wasn't the founder of Own the Play, I'd be playing every day. I love daily. I really saw great success. I won tournaments at every sport. The prize pools were a lot smaller in 2013, but I really love daily fantasy. And so, anyways, speed us up a little bit here. Own the Play got funding from Inkwell. Inkwell is a VC firm here in Michigan. Founding member is Tom Lasorda, who's the former CEO of Chrysler. Limited partner is Roger Penske, who's really America's most successful athlete turned businessman ever. He's the CEO of a billion-dollar company. So very, very cool to have that investment team that supports us. We actually share an office together, so it's a very symbiotic relationship. And that kind of speeds us up to where we are now and where the product stands. And I'll gladly answer any questions you may have on that. But I know our focus of this interview is going to be on ownership. So I can touch on a couple, or really what Own the Play offers when it comes to ownership, which is we're the only company in daily showing ownership rates live in real time. And so what that does for people is you get to see what you're up against. That is a very, very important factor, and kind of the nuances that go into that. I'll kick back to you, Mike, for some questions on it. But I'm going to touch on just 3 high-level things here, which are identifying chalk, understanding who's incredibly low-owned, and then a major kind of new theme that I've been telling all Own the Play customers that want to listen, understanding the value of duplication and the elimination factor. That's something that has to work in our favor. We know when we draft players that there's going to be a level of duplication. So when you do that, let's put ourselves into contests that take advantage of those scenarios. And I'll get into that, Mike, as you ask me some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a step back a little bit, getting a little more inside baseball, I guess. Why do you think player ownership, was there a moment where you, like an aha moment where you just knew that this is something that's really important within this industry? And is there an example in particular where maybe you were like, oh, this is something that we can implement into a product?
Yeah, so I will say so much of what goes on in daily is based on the legal constraints that our government gives us. So if it was up to me, I might offer a product that's much more of a stock exchange approach. Unfortunately, I feel it's totally illegal. So I had to peel back from that option. And that's kind of what the initial thoughts of ownership does, because ownership that's shown live can fluctuate in real time and does have kind of that stock market-esque feel. So going even further back, when the scandals, and scandal's a shitty word for it, but when the stuff happened with the alleged insider trading out of FanDuel and DraftKings, all of this kind of stuff, can I offer a stock market-esque product, seeing this insider trading, wanting to get really the experience exactly the same for someone on their couch as my head of technology, seeing kind of where people are losing and winning in daily. All of those events kind of happen at the same time, and that's where we decided to just flip the switch and allow for live ownership rates to always be a part of Own the Play.
Awesome. Yeah, so getting a little more into ownership strategy, you said earlier, talking about identifying chalk, and this can be really an important concept within both cash games and tournaments. How do you approach that?
Yeah, so what's really great about identifying chalk with live ownership is you see it. So you absolutely get to see who's 50% owned, and then understanding from those chalk plays or higher. We definitely see instances where Jared Jack would be an easy example too in previous years, where Jared Jack wasn't the projected starter. Someone gets hurt, he's min-priced, he's owned by 70% of the audience. So understanding how to play that. And that's where live ownership has become, and the ideas for me are very, very new. Live ownership is very new. So I'm sure your audience is going to have a lot of ideas themselves, but understanding that there's a difference in playing Clayton Kershaw at 70% owned and some kind of low-priced, other player that's 70% owned, and understanding that those percentages can really direct you into what contests to play. So what I mean by that, and I touched on it a little bit, is if I'm going to draft Clayton Kershaw and he's 70% owned, I want to pound as many 50-50s as possible. And the reason for that is even when he's 70% owned, the other 30% don't own him. And so you immediately get the upside of that. If you're playing heads-up games in that scenario, there is such a high likelihood, a 70% chance, but he's probably going to be the highest owned pitcher in that slate. And then you just eliminate all of his value in a heads-up. I hate that scenario. When we talk about, though, let's say a less talented player, there are so many times where what I would consider maybe slightly higher floors, but very low ceiling guys to be 70% owned, please start playing heads-ups. You absolutely have to. And the reason why I say that, and Mike and I were talking about this before, it's the elimination factor is so beneficial to you. We all make the same mistake. We all draft that 70% bum, and he stinks because he is a bum. So allow your opponent to also have him as well. And with that, he has no value, which is what you want. You want the guy that's your 8th or 9th choice on a given day to essentially have no value. And by showing live ownership, you get to see I have these 5 or 6 core guys that make up my lineup, and then I have these 3 or 4 fringe guys that I'm kind of not as sure about. But when those fringe guys are really highly owned, and you're pounding heads-up games, then the duplication factor is so beneficial to you because they have so much less. They have so much less of a factor in what the final result is. So live ownership is so a friend for you in choosing which kinds of contests to put more of your money in, whether it's 50-50s or heads-ups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess on the other side of the coin, identifying those fringe players, those under-owned players, obviously this is a huge thing for tournaments, GPPs, and things like that. And what are your general thoughts on how to go about it when you're seeing live ownership?
Yeah, and live ownership, too, is really starting to shed light on kind of opportunities, as you very fairly pointed out. One of my favorite kind of analogy for it, and everyone here knows and hears in the office, is kind of the Devontae Freeman effect. So Devontae Freeman last year, incredibly talented guy in a high-powered offense. Coleman goes down. Freeman now all of a sudden there's no one taking carries from him. In weeks, it was either 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. Talented guys in DFS owned him at a very high percentage. The actual, though, entire audience of DFS owned him at less than 5%. So what we get to rightfully do with live ownership is, number one, we get to close that knowledge gap a little bit. Because there's no way in the world that, a guy, as I said, no one's taking his carries, he's talented, in a high-powered offense, should ever go 5% owned. Well, at the same time, live ownership is not going to take him from 5% to 70%. It hasn't been a reality here at all. I wouldn't believe that would be a reality if it was adopted by much more of my larger competitors. But what it does fairly do is, as I pointed out, it sheds light on these kinds of opportunities where a guy, we can use the Jared Jack example, you can use Devontae Freeman, any of these kind of high usage rate guys all of a sudden should never go so low owned as they do, and this sheds light on that. It gives opportunity to that. I don't think it does the picking, though, and there's been no data to this point to prove that it does do the picking, but it will move the needle a little bit. It will take people that I think are on the fringe or cusp of winning and push them over the edge a little bit to get them to start to win more, because they make better decisions. They add guys like Devontae Freeman to their lineup when previously they weren't, for a multitude of reasons.